The text message glowed on the screen like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I stared at it until the letters blurred, until my eyes burned from not blinking, until the words stopped making sense and became just shapes, just symbols of something irreversibly broken. You deserve a better life than your husband gives you. The sender, Julian Valor. The timestamp, 11:47 p.m., 17 minutes ago. 17 minutes while I had been lying next to my wife in our bed, exhausted from another 16-hour workday, believing we were building something together, believing every sacrifice had meaning. The phone wasn't even mine. It was Clara's, sitting on her nightstand, screen up because she always kept it that way in case of emergencies. The notification had lit up the dark bedroom like a flare, and now I sat frozen on the edge of our mattress, the device cold and heavy in my trembling hand, listening to the sound of the shower running in our ensuite bathroom. Steam was creeping under the door, bringing with it the scent of her lavender body wash, that familiar smell that had meant home and comfort for 8 years. Tonight, it smelled like a lie. My heart was doing something strange in my chest, beating too fast and too slow at the same time, each thump painful and distinct like a hammer against an anvil. The bedroom around me felt suddenly foreign. The cream-colored walls we had painted together 3 summers ago, the framed photograph on the dresser from our honeymoon in Sedona, both of us grinning at the camera, her hair wild in the desert wind, my arm around her waist like I would never let go. The reading lamp on my side of the bed with the crooked shade I kept meaning to fix. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. I could feel it, that sensation of the floor dropping away beneath you, that moment when you realize gravity has betrayed you and you're already falling. Julian Valor. The name tasted bitter in my mind. Her spiritual coach, the man whose voice had become the soundtrack to our lives over the past year, emanating from every speaker in our apartment at all hours. His podcasts playing while she cooked breakfast, his guided meditations humming from her phone while she did yoga in the living room, his online workshops streaming on our television every Sunday morning while I nursed my coffee and tried not to feel resentful about losing our lazy weekend mornings together. I had tolerated it all, more than tolerated. I had supported it, encouraged it, funded it, and this message, this casual destruction of everything we had built together, this was my reward. The water shut off. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of Clara moving around in the bathroom, the soft rustle of towels, the quiet click of cabinets opening and closing. I had maybe 90 seconds before she walked out, 90 seconds to decide what to do with this information that was burning a hole through my chest. Did I confront her immediately? Did I pretend I hadn't seen it? Did I screenshot it and send it to myself as evidence? Evidence of what? That my marriage was over? That I had been working myself into an early grave for a woman who was being convinced by another man that I wasn't enough? My hands moved without conscious thought, my thumb hovering over the message to open the full conversation. I hesitated. This was a violation of privacy. I knew that. We had always respected each other's phones, never snooped, never checked messages. But then again, she had left it screen up. She had made it visible. And that text, that single line of text, had already violated something far more sacred than digital privacy. It had violated trust. It had violated our vows. It had violated the very foundation of everything I thought we were building together. I opened the conversation thread. My eyes scanned frantically, drinking in months of exchanges I had never known existed. The earliest messages were innocuous enough, brief exchanges about scheduling their one-on-one coaching sessions, reminders about upcoming workshops. But as I scrolled, they became more personal, more intimate, not physically intimate, nothing explicit, but something that felt somehow worse. Emotional intimacy, philosophical intimacy, the sharing of thoughts and feelings that I thought she shared with me. "You're too evolved for the people around you to understand," Julian had written in March. "I feel so seen when I talk to you," Clara had replied, "like you're the only one who really gets what I'm trying to become." My stomach turned. I scrolled faster, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "Your energy is blocked by people who refuse to grow with you," from April. "Sometimes we have to leave people behind to reach our true potential." "I know you're right," Clara had written back. "It's just hard when those people are family." Family. She meant me. She had to mean me. Who else was she trying to leave behind? More messages, more poison dripped slowly into her mind over months. And then, 2 weeks ago, a longer exchange. "Julian, The retreat will be transformational for you, Clara. I can feel it. You're ready to shed your old skin completely. But you need to be prepared for resistance when you return. People who benefit from keeping you small will try to pull you back down. Clara, my husband doesn't understand any of this. He thinks he's being supportive, but he just sees it as me spending money on nothing. Julian, does he ever ask about your growth? About what you're learning? About who you're becoming? Clara, not really. He works all the time. When he's home, he's tired. We barely talk anymore. I had to stop reading. I put the phone face down on the nightstand exactly where I had found it, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The bathroom door opened. Clara emerged in a cloud of lavender-scented steam, her dark hair wrapped in a towel, her body covered in her favorite oversized bathrobe, the blue one I had given her last Christmas. She was humming something, a melody I didn't recognize, probably from one of Julian's meditation recordings. She looked relaxed, peaceful, glowing with post-shower contentment. The sight of her happiness, knowing what I now knew, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "Hey," she said, smiling at me. "Why are you sitting in the dark? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. I just stared at her. This woman I had loved for a decade, this stranger who was planning to leave me behind, to shed me like old skin, on the advice of a man I was paying. Her smile faltered. "Liam, what's wrong? Did something happen at work?" Work. The word almost made me laugh, a bitter, choking sound. "No," I finally managed. "Nothing at work." She crossed the room, sat down next to me on the bed, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her freshly showered skin. The intimacy of it felt obscene now. "You're scaring me. What is it?" I picked up her phone, held it out to her. "Your spiritual guide texted you." She took the phone, her eyes scanning the screen. I watched her face carefully, looking for guilt, for shame, for any recognition that what I had discovered was wrong. Instead, I saw irritation, a flash of anger that I had seen the message. Her jaw tightened. "You looked at my phone," she said. Not a question, an accusation. It lit up. I saw the message. "Clara, what is going on?" She stood up, creating distance between us, clutching the phone to her chest like it was something precious that needed protecting from me. "This is exactly what Julian said would happen," she said, her voice cold in a way I had never heard directed at me before. "He said people would try to create conflict to hold me back from my transformation." Creating conflict? I stood too, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Clara, he told you that you deserve better than me, better than your husband. The husband who has been working 2 jobs to pay for your transformation. The husband who sold his father's watch so you could go on this retreat. How is pointing that out creating conflict?" Her eyes widened at the mention of the watch, and for a moment, just a brief, flickering moment, I saw something crack in her armor. "You sold your dad's watch?" "The Omega, the one he gave me on our wedding day. I got $8,000 for it. It covered the second payment for your Ascension retreat." The words tasted like ashes. "You asked me where I got the money, and I lied. I told you I sold some old stuff. I didn't want you to feel guilty. I wanted you to be happy." She sat back down on the bed, slowly, like her legs had given out. "Liam, I didn't know. You never said anything. You just said we'd make it work." I said we would make it work, because that's what I thought we were. A we. A partnership. A team. But apparently Julian thinks you're a solo act being held back by your supporting cast. "Don't twist his words," she snapped, defensive walls slamming back into place. "He's helping me find myself. He's helping me become who I'm supposed to be. By telling you to leave me? By convincing you that I'm not enough? Clara, I have done everything, given everything, to support you through this past year. I've worked myself sick. I've emptied our savings. I've sacrificed things that mattered to me because your happiness mattered more. And this is what it gets me? Advice from another man that you deserve better?" She stood up again, pacing now, agitated. "You don't understand. You can't understand. You've never tried to understand what I'm going through. You just throw money at it and think that's support." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "I work those extra hours so you don't have to worry about money while you figure yourself out. I do it so you can take all the workshops and courses you want. I do it because I love you. How is that not understanding? When was the last time you asked me what I learned in one of my sessions?" she countered. "When was the last time you showed any genuine interest in my spiritual growth instead of just asking how much it cost?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't. She was right about that, at least partially. I had supported her financially, logistically, making sure she had the time and resources she needed. But had I engaged with the actual content of what she was learning? Had I asked the deeper questions about what was changing inside her? In my defense, she had never really invited me into that world. It had always felt like her private thing, her separate journey. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe somewhere along the way, her journey had diverged from our path, and I had been too busy working to notice. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "You're right. I should have been more present, more engaged. But Clara, look at what's happening here. This man is driving a wedge between us. Can't you see that? This message isn't about your growth. It's about isolating you. It's about making you think that everyone who loves you is actually holding you back." She shook her head, her expression a mixture of pity and frustration. "No, Liam, you're the one creating the isolation by refusing to grow with me. Julian said this would happen. He said the people in my life would feel threatened by my evolution and would try to sabotage it." "I'm not trying to sabotage anything." My voice cracked with desperation. "I'm trying to save our marriage. Clara, please, can't you hear yourself? You're quoting him. You're defending him. You're trusting a stranger's opinion about our relationship more than you're trusting your own husband." "He's not a stranger," she said softly. "He sees me in a way you never have." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and final. I felt something inside me shatter, something I hadn't even known could break. "Then what are we doing here?" I whispered. "If he sees you better than I do, if I'm just the wallet funding your journey away from me, then what's the point?" She looked at me with eyes that seemed suddenly tired, aged beyond her 32 years. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "I really don't know." We stood there in the darkness of our bedroom, the space between us feeling like a canyon, like miles and years, instead of just a few feet and 8 years of marriage. The silence was suffocating. I wanted to reach for her, to close the distance, to hold her, and tell her we could fix this. But I didn't know how to fix something when she didn't think it was broken, when she thought I was the problem, and Julian Valor was the solution. Finally, I spoke, my voice hollow. "When do you leave for the retreat?" "Thursday," she said. "Day after tomorrow." "And when you come back, what happens?" She didn't answer. She just looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, something between sadness and resolve. Then she turned away, walked to her side of the bed, and slipped under the covers with her back to me. The conversation was over. I stood there for a long time, watching the rise and fall of her breathing before I grabbed my pillow and left the room. I slept on the couch that night, if you could call it sleep. Mostly, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember when exactly I had lost my wife to a man who promised enlightenment for a price. The next 2 days passed in a fog of mechanical routine. I went to work. I came home. Clara and I moved around each other like ghosts, polite and distant, speaking only when necessary about practical things. She needed a ride to the airport. I arranged to leave work early. She needed her good hiking boots. I helped her find them in the back of the closet. We existed in parallel, no longer intersecting. The apartment felt hollow, even with both of us in it. Wednesday night, I came home to find her suitcase by the door, packed and ready. She was in the kitchen making herself a smoothie, some green concoction that was probably full of vibrationally aligned superfoods. I set my briefcase down, loosened my tie. "All packed?" I asked. "Yeah, I think I have everything." She didn't look at me, focusing intently on adding precise measurements of powder to her blender. "Clara, can we talk? Before you go?" She finally turned, leaning against the counter. "About what?" "About us. About what happens when you get back. About whether there's still an us to come back to." She sighed, a sound of exhaustion. "I don't think we should have this conversation right now. I need to go into this retreat with clear energy, not weighted down by heavy discussions. Heavy discussions about our marriage," I said flatly. "That's what we've become to you, a weight, heavy energy." "That's not fair," she protested, but without much conviction. "None of this is fair," I replied. "But I need to know, Clara, do you want to save this marriage? Because I do. I absolutely do. But I can't do it alone. I can't compete with Julian Valor whispering in your ear that you deserve better." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the counter. "I don't know what I want anymore," she finally said. "That's why I need this retreat, to get clarity, to figure out who I am and what I need. And what if you figure out that what you need doesn't include me?" She met my eyes then, and what I saw there terrified me. It wasn't anger or hatred, it was indifference. "Then I guess we'll both have our answer." I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. I just nodded, turned, and walked to the bedroom. I heard the blender start up behind me, the violent grinding sound feeling appropriate for the moment. That night, we slept in the same bed, but on opposite edges, a vast expanse of cold sheets between us. I didn't sleep. I just listened to her breathe and tried to memorize the sound in case it was one of the last times I would hear it. Thursday morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. I took the afternoon off as promised, drove home at noon to pick Clara up for her 3 p.m. flight. She was ready and waiting, sitting on the couch with her suitcase, scrolling through her phone, probably reading encouraging messages from Julian and the other retreat attendees. I grabbed her bag, loaded it into the trunk of my car, and we drove to the airport in near total silence. The radio filled the void, some morning talk show hosts laughing about something trivial. Their joy felt obscene. At a red light, I glanced over at Clara. She was staring out the window, her profile silhouetted against the gray sky, and she looked beautiful. She had always been beautiful to me, from the first moment I saw her at a mutual friend's barbecue 10 years ago, laughing at something with her head thrown back, unself-conscious and radiant. I had fallen in love with her in that moment, before I even knew her name, and now I was driving her to the airport so she could fly across the country to spend a week with a man who thought I wasn't good enough for her. We arrived at the terminal. I pulled up to the departures curb, put the car in park, and got out to retrieve her suitcase from the trunk. Clara stood next to me on the sidewalk, slinging her carry-on over her shoulder. This was it, the moment of goodbye. "Well," she said, "I guess this is it. I guess so." I wanted to hug her, to kiss her, to beg her not to go, but my arms felt like lead weights at my sides. "Have a safe flight. Thanks for the ride." She started to turn away, then hesitated, looking back at me. For a second, I thought she might change her mind, might say this was all a mistake, might choose us. Instead, she said, "Liam, I'm sorry. I'm sorry it got to this point. I really am." "Me too," I managed. She nodded, turned, and walked through the automatic doors into the terminal. I watched until she disappeared into the crowd, and then I got back in my car and sat there in the loading zone until a security officer tapped on my window and told me I had to move. I drove home in a daze, every mile feeling like a countdown to something inevitable and terrible. The apartment was silent when I walked in. Clara's presence had always filled our space, even when she was quiet. Now it felt cavernous and empty. I walked from room to room, seeing evidence of her everywhere. Her coffee mug in the sink, still bearing the faint lipstick mark from this morning. Her stack of self-help books on the nightstand. Her yoga mat rolled up in the corner of the living room. The framed photo of us in Sedona. I picked up that photo, sat down on the couch, and stared at our younger, happier faces. In the picture, I was looking at the camera, grinning like an idiot, but Clara was looking at me, her expression soft and full of love. When had she stopped looking at me like that? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hoping irrationally that it might be Clara, that she might have realized at the gate that she was making a mistake. Instead, it was a notification from my banking app, a transaction alert. I opened it, frowning. Clara had used our joint credit card. That wasn't unusual. She probably bought something at the airport, but the amount made me sit up straight, $450. At an airport restaurant? I checked the merchant name, confusion growing. It wasn't a restaurant, it was a jewelry store in the terminal. $450 on jewelry. I felt my jaw clench. We were broke. I had emptied our savings, sold my father's watch, worked myself to exhaustion, and she was buying jewelry on our credit card? For what? To wear to the retreat? To impress Julian? I tried to push down the anger, to tell myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a gift for someone. Maybe it was something she'd been planning to buy for a while. But the timing felt like a slap in the face. I was sitting in our empty apartment, drowning in the wreckage of our marriage, and she was shopping. The next 7 days were the longest of my life. I threw myself into work because the alternative was sitting in our apartment feeling sorry for myself. I picked up extra projects, stayed late at the office, ate takeout at my desk, and tried not to count the hours until Clara would be back. She had promised to text when she landed, but I hadn't heard from her. By Friday afternoon, I broke down and sent a message. "Just checking that you made it there okay." She responded 6 hours later. "Yes, it's beautiful here. The energy is incredible. My phone barely has service, so I won't be online much. Talk when I get back." That was it. No, I miss you. No, I love you. Just a status update. Over the next week, I got 3 more texts from her, each one shorter and more distant than the last. Meanwhile, I spiraled. I looked up Julian Valor online, really investigated him for the first time. His website was slick and professional, full of testimonials from transformed lives, before and after photos of people looking serious and then looking blissful, promises of breakthrough and awakening. His prices were astronomical. The Ascension Retreat alone was $17,000 per person. I had paid $17,000 for someone to spend a week convincing my wife to leave me. I dug deeper. There were some critical articles, a few blog posts from former followers who called him manipulative, who said he isolated people from their families, who claimed he was more interested in building his bank account than building consciousness. But there were just as many glowing reviews calling him a visionary, a healer, a guide. It was impossible to know what was true. All I knew was that he had my wife, literally and figuratively, and I was powerless to stop it. By Wednesday, I was barely functioning. I hadn't slept more than a few hours a night all week. I couldn't eat. I had lost 6 pounds. My boss pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. I lied and said everything was fine. I went back to my desk and stared at blueprints without seeing them. My mind thousands of miles away at a retreat center I had never seen, where my wife was probably sitting in a circle with other seekers, listening to Julian tell them all how they deserved better than the lives they had left behind. Thursday morning, the day Clara was supposed to fly home, I woke up on the couch at 5 a.m. to my phone ringing. For a disoriented moment, I thought it might be her, calling to say she was coming home early, that she missed me, that this had all been a horrible mistake. Instead, it was my mother. "Liam, honey, I'm so sorry to call this early, but I wanted you to hear this from me." My blood ran cold. "Mom, what's wrong? Is it Dad?" No, your father's fine. It's just that Linda called me last night." "You know Linda, Helen's mother, from church? Well, her daughter Jennifer is at some kind of retreat in Arizona, and she sent photos to her mother. Liam, Clara is in those photos." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "Jennifer's at the same retreat, and she sent pictures to her mom. Clara's in them, with a man. A man who isn't you." The room spun. "Mom, that's her spiritual coach, Julian. She's supposed to be at that retreat. That's why she went." "Honey," my mother's voice was pained. "In the photos, he has his arm around her. They're sitting very close together. Linda thought I should know. She wasn't sure if you knew Clara was there with him." I couldn't breathe. "Can you send me the photos?" "Linda sent them to me. I'll forward them now." "Liam, I'm so sorry." My phone buzzed with incoming images. 3 photos. In the first, it was a group shot. A dozen or so people sitting in a circle in what looked like an expensive, rustic lodge. Clara was clearly visible, sitting cross-legged, looking serene. Next to her was a man I recognized from his website photos, Julian Valor. Handsome in that carefully cultivated, aggressively spiritual way. Man bun, expensive casual clothing, the kind of face that photographed well. He wasn't touching her in that photo. The second photo showed a smaller group, maybe 6 people, at dinner. Clara and Julian were sitting next to each other. His arm was draped casually across the back of her chair. She was laughing at something he was saying, her face tilted toward him, animated in a way she hadn't looked at me in months. The third photo was the one that made me feel like I was going to be sick. Just Clara and Julian, outside somewhere, mountains in the background, golden hour lighting. His arm was around her shoulders, and she was leaning into him. They weren't kissing, nothing overtly romantic, but the body language was clear. The intimacy was unmistakable, and she looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy in a way I hadn't seen since before she lost her job. Since before any of this began. I thanked my mother, ended the call, and sat there holding my phone, staring at those images until they burned into my retinas. $17,000. My father's watch. 3 months of working until I could barely stand. All for this. All so my wife could fall into the arms of a con artist who saw her not as a person to heal, but as a resource to exploit. Something in me calcified in that moment. The hurt didn't go away, but it transmuted into something harder, colder, clarity. This wasn't about spiritual growth. This wasn't about Clara finding herself. This was a predator who had identified a vulnerable woman with access to money, and he had systematically alienated her from everyone who might protect her, all while I bankrolled the operation. I went to my computer, started a new document, and began to make a list. Every transaction, every payment to Julian Valor's organization, every workshop, every course, every piece of merchandise, every payment plan installment. I pulled up our joint credit card statements, our bank accounts, receipts I had saved. The numbers were staggering. In the 12 months since Clara had found Julian, we had spent $34,000 on his programs. $34,000 from our joint accounts, from my extra freelance work, from our savings for a house, from the sale of my father's watch. $34,000 to a man who was now photographed with his arm around my wife. I thought about the message I had seen on her phone. You deserve a better life than your husband gives you. The arrogance of it stung anew. I was the one who had given her this life. I had given her the financial freedom to explore these programs. I had given her my time, my support, my inheritance, and Julian Valor, who had given her nothing but pretty words and false promises, was telling her she deserved better than me. But here's what he didn't know. Here's what Clara didn't know. The retreat, the one she was attending right now, the one where she was laughing with Julian and leaning into his embrace, wasn't funded by some magical universe providing for her spiritual journey. It was funded by me. Specifically, it was funded by a massive freelance contract I had signed 5 months ago. The Henderson Project, designing the structural framework for a new medical complex. It was the biggest contract of my career, worth $120,000 over 8 months. I had taken it specifically to pay for Clara's retreat and to rebuild our savings afterward. But here's the other thing Julian Valor didn't know. The client, Henderson Medical Group, wasn't just any client. The CEO, Marcus Henderson, was my college roommate. We had stayed close over the years. He knew I was married. He had met Clara at our wedding. And when I called him that afternoon, my voice shaking with rage and hurt, and told him I needed a favor, he listened. I need to know who owns that retreat center, I said. The Ascension Sanctuary in Sedona. Can you find out? Why? Marcus asked, concerned. Because I think the man running it is scamming my wife. And I want to know everything about his operation before she comes home tomorrow. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Give me 4 hours. He called me back in 3. Liam, sit down for this. The Ascension Sanctuary is owned by a company called Valor Wellness, LLC. Julian Valor is listed as the founder and CEO. But get this, the property itself, the land and buildings, are under a lease-to-own agreement. And the holding company that owns the property? It's owned by a man named Gerald Voss. You're not going to believe this, but Voss was arrested in 2019 for running a pyramid scheme. He served 2 years. Julian Valor was his accountant. My blood ran cold. His accountant? Yeah, and it gets better. Or worse, depending on your perspective. Julian changed his name legally in 2020. Before that, he was James Valdez. I found some stuff online. He worked for Voss's company, was investigated but never charged, and then reinvented himself as a spiritual guru. I sat there absorbing this information. Julian Valor was a fraud, not just metaphorically, not just because he was a charlatan selling enlightenment, but literally. He had worked for a convicted con artist and then created his own con, just with better branding. There's more, Marcus continued. I looked into his retreat pricing. $17,000 per person, right? The Ascension Sanctuary can host 20 people at a time. He runs these retreats twice a month. That's $340,000 per retreat. $6.8 million a year just from the retreats. That's not counting his online courses, his coaching fees, his merchandise. Liam, this guy is making bank. Off vulnerable people, I said quietly. Off vulnerable people, Marcus confirmed. I'm sorry, man. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. But thank you, Marcus. Really, anytime. And Liam, if you need anything else, call me. I mean it. I hung up and sat in my home office, surrounded by blueprints and calculations, the tools of my trade that built real things in the real world. And I thought about Julian Valor, née James Valdez, who built nothing but illusions and lived like a king doing it. I thought about Clara, who had been so desperate for purpose and meaning after losing her job that she had fallen for his carefully crafted persona. And I thought about myself, the devoted husband who had enabled all of it, who had paid for his own obsolescence. By the time Clara texted me her flight information Thursday night, I had made my decision. I would pick her up from the airport. I would bring her home. I would listen to whatever she had to say about her transformative week. And then, calmly and methodically, I would show her exactly who Julian Valor really was. I would show her the financial records, the background check Marcus had run, the truth about the man she thought she could trust, and then I would give her a choice, our marriage or her spiritual guide. But she would make that choice with full information, not the half-truths and manipulations Julian had been feeding her. I barely slept Thursday night, running through scenarios in my head. Friday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. I cleaned the apartment, changed the sheets, bought fresh flowers for the kitchen table. I wanted her to come home to something welcoming, something that reminded her what we had been before Julian. Her flight was due to land at 2 p.m. I left for the airport at noon, giving myself plenty of time, my stomach churning with anxiety and anger and a desperate, foolish hope that maybe, somehow, the week away would have given her perspective. I waited at the arrivals gate, watching passengers stream out, hugging loved ones, moving on with their lives. And then I saw her. She was one of the last people off the plane, and she looked different, lighter somehow. She was wearing clothes I didn't recognize, flowing and bohemian. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She was glowing, and she was alone. Our eyes met across the crowd. She stopped walking, and for a long moment, we just looked at each other. Then she came forward, slowly, pulling her small suitcase behind her. "Hi," she said. "Hi. How was your flight?" "Fine. Long." She looked uncomfortable, nervous. "Ready to go home?" I asked, reaching for her suitcase. She pulled it back slightly. "Actually, Liam, can we talk first? There's a coffee shop upstairs." My heart sank. Okay. We rode the escalator in silence, found a table in a corner of an overpriced airport cafe, and sat down across from each other. Clara folded her hands on the table, took a deep breath. "I have to tell you something," she began. "Here it comes," I thought. "This is where she says she's leaving. This is where it all ends." "The retreat was incredible," she continued. "I learned so much about myself, about what I want and need in my life, and I realized something important." I waited, barely breathing. "I realized that I've been unfair to you, really unfair." Her eyes filled with tears. "Julian kept telling me that I deserved better, that you were holding me back, and I started believing it. I started seeing everything you did through this filter of inadequacy. But this week, being away, having time to actually think without his voice in my ear constantly, I started seeing things more clearly. Hope flickered in my chest, dangerous and painful. There was this moment on day 3 when we were doing this exercise about gratitude. We were supposed to think about what we were grateful for in our lives, and everyone was saying these generic things, like sunshine and breathing and their spiritual awakening. But all I could think about was you, about how you've supported me unconditionally through this past year, even when I know you didn't understand what I was doing, about how you worked extra hours so I wouldn't stress about money, about how you've never once told me I was being silly or ridiculous, even though I'm sure you thought it sometimes." Tears were streaming down her face now. And then Julian started this lecture about how gratitude for our old lives was just our ego trying to keep us trapped. He said we had to be willing to release everything and everyone who wasn't serving our highest purpose. And I looked around at these people, all nodding and agreeing, ready to throw away their whole lives for this man's approval. And I realized that's what I've been doing. I've been throwing away the best thing in my life because a stranger told me I deserved better. She reached across the table, took my hands. "Liam, I am so sorry. I have been horrible to you. I've been selfish and blind, and I've let someone else get into my head and twist everything around. Can you forgive me?" I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight. I just squeezed her hands, tears burning in my own eyes. "There's something else," she said, pulling back slightly. "Something happened at the retreat that you need to know about." My stomach dropped. "What?" Julian made a pass at me. On the last night, after the closing ceremony, he asked me to come to his private quarters to discuss my integration plan for when I got home. When I got there, he tried to kiss me. Rage, pure and white-hot, flooded through me. "He what?" I pushed him away, she said quickly. I told him that was completely inappropriate, and I left. But Liam, it made me realize what this whole thing really was. He wasn't trying to help me grow. He was grooming me. All those messages about deserving better, about you holding me back, it was all designed to make me vulnerable and dependent on him. And I was so caught up in the idea of spiritual growth that I couldn't see the manipulation. She wiped her eyes, her expression hardening. I talked to some of the other women there after it happened. Turns out I'm not the first one he's tried that with. There's a woman named Melissa who's been part of his programs for 3 years. She slept with him, thinking it was some kind of spiritual connection, and then he ghosted her and moved on to the next vulnerable person. She spent $40,000 on his programs, destroyed her marriage, and he treated her like she was disposable. I thought about the photos my mother had forwarded, Julian's arm around Clara's shoulders. I thought about the $34,000 we had spent, and I thought about how close I had come to losing everything. "Clara," I said slowly, "I need to show you something." I pulled out my phone, opened the folder where I had saved all my research from yesterday. I showed her the financial records, the background check on Julian, the information about his real name, his past employer, the pyramid scheme. I watched her face go pale as she read, her hand covering her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Liam. This is who I've been trusting? This is who I've been choosing over you?" "You didn't know," I said. "He's very good at what he does. That's why he's successful." $34,000, she read, her voice breaking. "We spent $34,000 on this man? Liam, that was our house fund. That was your father's watch. That was your time and your energy, and I threw it all away on a con artist." "We threw it away," I corrected gently. "I could have stopped it earlier. I could have questioned things more. I just wanted you to be happy." She looked at me with such pain and regret in her eyes. "I don't deserve you. I really don't." "Stop," I said firmly. "That's his language. That's the kind of thing he says to break people down. You made a mistake. We both made mistakes, but we can fix this, if you want to." "I want to," she said immediately, desperately. "Liam, I want to fix this more than anything. I want us back. I want our life back. I want to start over and be the wife you deserve." We sat there in that airport coffee shop, holding hands across a sticky table, both crying, both exhausted, but together. The wreckage of the past year lay between us, but so did the possibility of rebuilding. It would take time. It would take work. But for the first time in months, I felt like we were on the same side again. "Let's go home," I said finally. She nodded, stood up, and this time when I reached for her suitcase, she let me take it. We walked out of the airport together, side by side, not quite touching, but closer than we'd been in a long time. The drive home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than the drive to the airport had been. This silence felt like healing, like the moment after a fever breaks. When we got back to our apartment, Clara stopped in the doorway, looking around. "You cleaned," she said softly. "I wanted it to be nice when you got home." She turned to me, fresh tears in her eyes. "I've been such a fool." "You've been hurt and lost and looking for answers," I said. "That doesn't make you a fool. It makes you human." She dropped her suitcase right there in the entryway, crossed the distance between us, and wrapped her arms around me. I held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her body against mine. She was home. She was really home. We spent the rest of Friday talking, really talking, more honestly than we had in months. She told me about the retreat, about the manipulative tactics Julian had used, the way he isolated them from their phones and families, the constant reinforcement that their old lives were prisons they needed to escape. She told me about the other women, the ones who had given up everything for his approval and were now adrift. She cried as she described the moment when Julian tried to kiss her, how violated and stupid she had felt. I told her about the sleepless nights, the stress of trying to keep up with the costs, the moment I saw that message on her phone and felt my world collapse. I told her about selling my father's watch, about how much that had hurt, but how I'd done it anyway, because her happiness mattered more than an object. I showed her all the research Marcus had helped me compile, and we sat together reading through it, piecing together the full picture of who Julian Valor really was. "We need to do something," Clara said finally, her voice hard with determination. "He's going to keep doing this to other people, other couples, other families. Someone has to stop him. What do you suggest?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." She was right. I didn't like it, but I had to admit it was brilliant. Clara's idea was risky, possibly dangerous, and completely unlike anything I would have expected from her. But as she explained it to me that Friday evening, sitting cross-legged on our couch with a determination in her eyes I hadn't seen in over a year, I realized that the woman I had married was still in there. She had just been buried under months of manipulation and false promises. Now she was clawing her way back to the surface, and she was angry. "I want to go back," she said. I stared at her. "Back? Back to the retreat? Clara, you just got home. You just told me he tried to kiss you. Why would you possibly want to go back?" "Not to the retreat," she clarified, leaning forward. "To his organization. He runs weekly meetings here in the city for his local followers. I've been to dozens of them. If I show up at the next one, acting like everything is fine, like I'm still devoted to his teachings, I can get close to him again, close enough to gather evidence." "Evidence of what?" I asked, though I was already starting to understand where she was going with this. "Evidence of fraud, of manipulation, of whatever we can find that will shut him down." Her hands were clenched into fists on her knees. "Liam, There were 20 people at that retreat. 20 people who paid $17,000 each. That's $340,000 for 1 week. And he does this twice a month. The things he promised us, the breakthroughs and transformations, they were all manufactured. Manufactured emotional experiences designed to make us dependent on him for more. He's not a spiritual teacher, he's a predator with good marketing. I felt a chill run through me. Clara, if we're going to do something about this, we need to be smart. We can't just accuse him without proof. He has lawyers. He has a whole organization behind him. If we come at him and fail, he'll bury us in legal fees and continue doing exactly what he's doing. I know, she said. That's why I need to get close. I need to document everything, record conversations, get financial records if I can, find other victims willing to talk, build a case that's so solid he can't squirm out of it. The thought of Clara putting herself back in Julian's orbit, even for a good reason, made my stomach turn. What if he tries something again? What if he realizes what you're doing? He won't. To him, I'm just another confused woman who came home from the retreat and realized her boring life isn't enough anymore. He's seen it 100 times. Women like me always come back. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. He's arrogant, Liam. That's his weakness. He thinks he's untouchable because he's been getting away with this for years. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think clearly. Every protective instinct I had was screaming at me to say no, to tell her we should just cut our losses and move on with our lives. But another part of me, the part that had been keeping score for the past year, the part that knew exactly how much we had lost, wanted justice, not just for us, but for Melissa, the woman Clara had mentioned who had spent $40,000 and destroyed her marriage. For all the other people who were currently sitting in Julian's meditation circles, opening their wallets and their hearts to a man who saw them as nothing more than revenue streams. Okay, I said finally, but we do this carefully. We document everything on our end too. We keep records of every interaction. And the second I think you're in any danger, we pull the plug. Agreed? Agreed. She reached over and took my hand. Thank you for trusting me. I know I haven't given you much reason to lately. You came back, I said simply. That's enough. The next local meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening at a yoga studio downtown that Julian rented for his gatherings. We spent the weekend preparing. Clara wrote down everything she could remember from the retreat, every manipulation tactic, every promise that hadn't been fulfilled, every moment that had felt off but she had dismissed at the time. I created a secure digital folder where we could store evidence, backed up to multiple cloud services. We researched recording laws in our state and confirmed that we could legally record conversations as long as one party consented, which Clara would be. On Sunday, I went to an electronics store and bought a small recording device disguised as a pen. It could capture 6 hours of audio and had a clip that would let Clara attach it to her clothing. We tested it that evening, and the quality was surprisingly good. Clear enough to capture not just words but tone, inflection, the subtle manipulation embedded in Julian's smooth voice. Monday morning, Clara sent a message to the group chat for Julian's local followers. Just got back from the Ascension retreat. My heart is so full. Can't wait to see everyone Wednesday and share my experience. Within an hour, she had a dozen responses, all enthusiastic welcomes back, and one private message from Julian himself. Clara, I'm so glad you made it home safely. I've been thinking about our conversation on the last night. I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable. Sometimes the energy between souls can be intense, and I may have misread the moment. I look forward to seeing you Wednesday. We have much to discuss about your integration plan. I read the message over Clara's shoulder and felt rage bubble up in my chest. The audacity of it. He was already reframing what had happened, making it about misread energy and cosmic connection, rather than what it actually was. A middle-aged con artist trying to take advantage of a vulnerable woman. He's smooth, Clara said quietly. Look how he's already setting up the narrative. If I called him out, he'd say I misunderstood, that I was projecting, that my ego was creating conflict because I wasn't ready for a higher form of connection. What are you going to say back? I asked. She thought for a moment, then typed, I understand. It was a lot to process. Looking forward to Wednesday. Short, neutral, keeping the door open. He responded immediately with a heart emoji and, see you soon. Tuesday and Wednesday crawled by. I went to work but couldn't focus on anything. I kept checking my phone, making sure Clara was okay, that she hadn't changed her mind about the plan. She spent both days reviewing Julian's online content, his podcasts and videos, studying his patterns of speech and manipulation so she would know what to listen for in person. Wednesday evening arrived. Clara dressed carefully, choosing clothes that looked spiritual and flowy, the kind of thing the other followers would wear. She tucked the recording pen into the breast pocket of her loose linen shirt, making sure it was secure and positioned to capture audio clearly. I adjusted it for her, my hands shaking slightly. "You don't have to do this," I said one last time. "Yes, I do," she replied. "For me, for us, for everyone he's hurt." I drove her to the yoga studio and parked down the block where I could see the entrance but wouldn't be visible to anyone going in. "I'll be right here the whole time," I told her. "You text me every 30 minutes so I know you're okay. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you leave. I don't care if you have to make up an excuse or just walk out. Your safety is more important than any evidence we might get." She kissed me, a quick, fierce press of lips. "I'll be fine, I promise." I watched her walk down the sidewalk toward the studio, her bag slung over her shoulder, looking for all the world like any other devoted follower, showing up for their weekly dose of enlightenment. She disappeared through the door. I checked my watch. It was 6:58 p.m. The meeting started at 7 and typically ran until 9. 2 hours. I settled in to wait. The minutes passed like hours. I tried to distract myself with my phone, scrolling through news articles I didn't process, playing mindless games that didn't hold my attention. At 7:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "All good. He's giving a talk about integrating retreat experiences. About 25 people here." I texted back a thumbs up and tried to breathe normally. At 8 o'clock, another text. "Small group discussions now. I'm in Julian's group, recording everything. 8:30. Taking a break. He wants to talk to me privately after. We'll keep recording." That message made my pulse spike. Privately. I didn't like the sound of that. But this was exactly what we needed, a chance for Clara to get him talking without the buffer of the group around them. I forced myself to trust her, to trust the plan. At 9:15, people started trickling out of the studio. I watched them pass my car, individuals in small clusters, talking animatedly about consciousness and vibrations and other concepts that I had once found harmlessly eccentric and now recognized as the vocabulary of manipulation. But Clara didn't emerge. 9:30, 9:45. No Clara, no text. At 9:50, I was reaching for my door handle, ready to go in there and pull her out regardless of the plan, when my phone finally buzzed. "Coming out now. Got it. Got everything." Relief flooded through me so intensely, I felt lightheaded. 30 seconds later, Clara walked out of the studio. She was alone, moving quickly, her expression neutral, but her body language tense. She got in the car, closed the door, and let out a long, shaky breath. "Drive," she said. "Just drive." I pulled out of the parking spot and headed toward home. "Are you okay? What happened?" "I'm fine. I'm good. Liam, I'm better than good." She pulled the recording pen from her pocket and held it up like a trophy. He confessed to everything, not directly, but enough. Enough that anyone listening will understand exactly what he's doing. "Tell me everything," I said, my hands tight on the steering wheel. She took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. The meeting itself was pretty standard. He gave a talk about how returning from the retreat can be difficult because we're bringing our new, elevated consciousness back into a low vibrational world. He talked about how the people in our lives might not understand our transformation and might try to pull us back down. Classic isolation technique, right? Making sure we see our families and friends as obstacles rather than support systems. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the road. Then we broke into small groups to discuss our experiences. I was in his group with 5 other women. We went around sharing, and when it was my turn, I talked about how transformative the retreat was, but how I was already feeling the pull of my old life. I mentioned that my husband didn't understand what I was going through. She glanced at me apologetically. "Sorry, I had to make it believable." "I know. Keep going." Julian jumped on that immediately. He said that was completely normal, that husbands often feel threatened when their wives start to grow beyond them. He said the real test of spiritual commitment is whether we're willing to choose our evolution over our comfort. Then after the group discussions ended and people started leaving, he asked if I wanted to stay and talk more about my integration challenges. My jaw clenched. "And you said yes?" I said yes. We went to the back office area of the studio, just the 2 of us. "And Liam," He was so calculated. He started by asking how things went when I got home. If my husband was angry about the retreat, I told him we had a fight, that you saw his text message telling me I deserved better. And instead of backing off or apologizing like a normal person would, he doubled down. What do you mean? I asked. Clara pulled out her phone, connected it to the car's Bluetooth, and opened a voice memo app. I already transferred the recording. Listen to this part. She skipped ahead to a timestamp and pressed play. Julian's voice filled the car, smooth and confident. Clara, that message wasn't meant to hurt you. It was meant to wake you up. You're an extraordinary woman with extraordinary potential, but you're trapped in a life that was designed when you were someone else, someone smaller. Your husband is a good man, I'm sure, but good men can still be anchors. They can love you and still hold you back, simply because they're not capable of growing at the same rate you are. I don't know, Clara's recorded voice responded, uncertain. He sacrificed a lot for me this past year. He paid for the retreat. He's been supportive, financially supportive perhaps, but has he been emotionally supportive, spiritually supportive? Has he done the inner work necessary to be a true partner in your evolution? A pause. Clara, I've been doing this for a long time. I've guided hundreds of women through the exact transformation you're experiencing, and I've seen over and over what happens when they try to maintain relationships with people who aren't on the same path. It doesn't work. Eventually, you have to choose growth or stagnation, freedom or obligation, your highest self or your husband. Clara stopped the recording. He kept going like that for another 10 minutes, systematically dismantling you, dismantling our marriage, making it sound like leaving you was the inevitable next step in my spiritual journey. That's damning, I said, but I'm not sure it's illegal. He's not directly telling you to leave me. He's just heavily implying it. I know, but that's not the best part. Wait. She fast-forwarded again, then played another section. Julian, can I ask you something? Clara's voice on the recording. Of course, anything. The retreat was $17,000. That's a lot of money. I just want to make sure I'm getting the full value from it. What exactly does that cost cover? A slight pause, then Julian's laugh, warm and reassuring. I appreciate you asking directly. Most people are afraid to talk about money and spirituality in the same conversation, but I believe in complete transparency. The cost covers the facility, the meals, the materials, and most importantly, my time and expertise. Creating the kind of safe, transformational container we had at the retreat takes years of training and development. You're not just paying for a week of my time, you're paying for the decades of work I've done to become the guide I am. That makes sense, Clara said. I guess I'm just thinking about the other women who were there. Melissa mentioned she's been working with you for 3 years. That must add up to a lot. Another pause, longer this time. When Julian spoke again, his voice was more guarded. Melissa has chosen to invest heavily in her growth. That's her decision. Everyone's journey is different. Of course. I'm just wondering, for someone like me who wants to continue working with you, what would that look like financially? I want to be prepared. Well, Julian said slowly, and I could almost hear him calculating. The weekly meetings here are free for anyone who's attended a retreat. But for deeper work, I offer private coaching sessions. Those are $500 per hour. I also have a year-long mentorship program that's $35,000. It includes monthly private sessions, access to exclusive workshops, and direct tech support from me. Clara paused the recording. Do you hear that? $500 per hour for coaching, $35,000 for a year-long program. And he presents it like he's doing people a favor, like he's this generous guide sharing his wisdom. It's predatory, I said, my voice flat. But again, not illegal. People are allowed to charge whatever they want for services, even if those services are nonsense. I know, Clara said. That's why I needed him to go further. So I did. She pressed play again. Julian, I have to be honest with you. I'm not sure I can afford that level of investment right now. My husband and I are pretty much tapped out after the retreat. I understand. Money can feel like a limitation, especially when we're just beginning to understand true abundance. His voice took on a coaching tone. But Clara, I want you to consider something. What if your financial situation is actually part of what's holding you back? What if your husband's scarcity mindset is keeping you trapped in a limited reality? What do you mean? I mean that you manifested the money for the retreat, didn't you? When you committed to your growth, the universe provided. That's not a coincidence. That's how energy works. But if you go home and let your husband pull you back into his fearful, limited thinking about money, you'll lose that connection to abundance. So what should I do? Keep Keep yourself in the frequency of abundance. Continue to invest in your growth. If your current circumstances can't support that, then maybe it's time to change your circumstances. There are women in my mentorship program who left marriages that were keeping them small and are now thriving, flourishing, living in alignment with their true purpose. And they have the money for the program? A soft chuckle. When you're living in alignment, Clara, the money always comes, sometimes from unexpected sources, inheritance, settlements from divorces, new opportunities that open up once you're free from relationships that were draining your energy. The universe supports those who support themselves. Clara stopped the recording and looked at me, her eyes blazing. Do you hear what he's doing? He's not just suggesting I leave you. He's financially incentivizing it. Divorce settlements. He's essentially coaching women to leave their marriages and use the money to pay him. I felt sick. That's beyond predatory. That's evil. There's more. She fast-forwarded one more time. This is the part where it gets really bad. Julian's voice again. I sense you're holding back from fully committing to this path, Clara. Can I ask what's creating that resistance? I guess I'm just scared. Scared of making the wrong choice. Scared of hurting people I love. I understand that fear. It's your ego trying to keep you safe by keeping you small. But let me ask you something. Are you more afraid of hurting your husband's feelings? Or are you afraid of never becoming who you're meant to be? Because I can tell you right now, one of those fears serves you and one doesn't. I don't want to hurt him. Of course you don't. You're a compassionate person. But Clara, and I say this with love, your husband will be fine. Men are resilient. He'll be hurt for a while, and then he'll move on and find someone who's a better match for where he is in his journey. Someone who doesn't trigger his inadequacy by growing beyond him. You staying with him out of guilt isn't kindness. It's actually cruelty to both of you. I never thought of it that way. Most people don't, but that's why you need a guide. Someone who can see clearly when you're too close to the situation. A pause. Clara, I'm going to be direct with you because I care about your evolution. You're standing at a crossroads. One path leads back to your comfortable, small life with a man who means well but can't meet you at the level you're growing to. The other path leads to your full potential, your true purpose, your highest self. But walking that second path requires courage. It requires sacrifice. And it requires trust in someone who's walked it before. Trust in you, you mean. Trust in me. Trust in the process. Trust in your own inner knowing that brought you to this work in the first place. His voice lowered, becoming more intimate. I believe in you, Clara. I see your light. I see who you can become. The question is, do you believe in yourself enough to choose it? Clara stopped the recording. We sat in silence for a moment as I processed what I had just heard. It was masterful manipulation, every word carefully chosen to dismantle her judgment, her resistance, her loyalty to anything except him. That's when I told him I needed time to think, Clara said quietly. I said I was overwhelmed and needed to process everything. He gave me his private cell number and told me to call anytime, day or night, if I needed support. Then he hugged me and I got out of there. I pulled into our apartment complex parking lot, put the car in park, and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. We have him, I said finally. Clara, this recording, combined with the financial records, combined with testimonies from other victims like Melissa, we have enough to destroy him. So what do we do with it? She asked. That was the question that kept us up most of that night. We sat at our kitchen table with my laptop, Clara's recordings, and a pot of coffee, trying to figure out the best way to expose Julian Valor for what he really was. We discussed going to the police, but quickly realized that while what he was doing was morally reprehensible, most of it probably wasn't technically illegal. He was offering services, people were voluntarily paying for them, and his coaching advice, while manipulative, didn't cross into actionable fraud. What about a lawyer? Clara suggested. Could we sue him for something? Emotional distress? Fraud? Alienation of affection? I researched it on my laptop. Alienation of affection is only recognized in a handful of states, and ours isn't one of them. Emotional distress is really hard to prove, and even harder to win. And fraud requires proving that he knowingly misrepresented facts, which would be tough when everything he does is couched in spiritual language that's subjective by nature. So he just gets away with it? Clara's voice rose in frustration. We have him on recording basically telling me to divorce you so I'll have money to pay him and there's nothing we can do? I didn't say that. I leaned back in my chair thinking. Legal action might not work, but public exposure might. If we can get this story out there, with your recordings, with testimonies from other victims, with the information about his real identity and his connection to that pyramid scheme. We can destroy his reputation. His whole business model depends on people trusting him. Take away that trust, and he has nothing. How do we get it out there? Clara asked. Social media? A blog post? Bigger than that, I said, an idea forming. We need journalists. Real investigative journalists who can take what we have, verify it, add their own research, and publish something that can't be ignored or dismissed. Clara's eyes lit up. That could actually work. But where do we even start with finding a journalist? As it turned out, we didn't have to look far. I remembered that Marcus, my friend who had helped me research Julian, had mentioned that his wife worked in public relations. PR people had connections with journalists. I texted Marcus at almost 1 a.m., apologizing for the hour but saying it was urgent. He called me back within 5 minutes. "Is Clara okay?" he asked immediately. "She's fine. Better than fine. Marcus, we have evidence. Recordings of Julian Valor essentially coaching Clara to leave me, so she'll have divorce settlement money to pay him. We have financial records showing he's made millions doing this. We have information about his criminal connections. We want to take him down, but we need help getting the story out there." There was a pause. "My wife knows someone, investigative reporter at a major news organization. She specializes in stories about fraud and manipulation. I can't promise anything, but I can make an introduction." "That would be amazing. Thank you, Marcus. Really. Hey, you do the same for me. I'll have Rebecca reach out to her contact tomorrow and see if she's interested." By Friday afternoon, we had our answer. The journalist, a woman named Patricia Chen, was very interested. She wanted to meet with us, hear the recordings, see all our documentation. We set up a meeting for Monday at her office downtown. That weekend was a strange limbo. We had a plan, we had evidence, but we didn't know if it would be enough or if anyone would care. Clara reached out privately to Melissa, the woman from the retreat who had been involved with Julian for 3 years. She told her what we were doing and asked if she would be willing to share her story with a journalist. Melissa was hesitant at first, afraid of the exposure, afraid of looking foolish. But when Clara sent her a clip of the recording where Julian talked about women leaving their marriages to access divorce settlements, Melissa's tune changed. "That's exactly what he told me," Melissa wrote back, word for word. "He said my marriage was keeping me from my purpose and that leaving would open up abundance. I did leave. I got $300,000 in my divorce settlement. I've spent almost half of it on his programs over the past 3 years. And now I'm alone, broke, and he won't even return my messages because I can't afford his coaching anymore. Would you be willing to talk to a reporter about it?" Clara asked. "Yes, absolutely yes. If it stops him from doing this to anyone else, I'll tell them everything." Monday morning, Clara and I took the day off work and went to meet Patricia Chen. Her office was in a tall building downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place that made you feel like serious business happened there. Patricia herself was in her mid-40s, sharply dressed, with an intensity in her eyes that suggested she didn't miss much. She listened to the recordings, all of them, taking notes on a legal pad, occasionally pausing to ask clarifying questions. She reviewed our financial records, documenting every payment we had made. She wrote down Melissa's contact information, and then she leaned back in her chair and looked at us thoughtfully. "This is good," she said finally. "Really good. But I need more. I need more victims. I need financial documents from his organization, not just from you. I need to understand the full scope of the operation. What you've given me is enough to start an investigation, but it's not enough to publish." My heart sank. How long will an investigation take? Weeks, maybe months. I'll need to track down other people who've been through his programs, get them to talk on record. I'll need to dig into his business filings, his tax records if I can access them. This kind of story, if it's done right, can have real impact, but it has to be bulletproof. His lawyers will come after us if there's even one detail we can't back up. "Months?" Clara said, discouraged. "He's running another retreat next week. That's 20 more people he's going to manipulate, 20 more families he's going to damage." Patricia's expression softened. "I understand your urgency. I really do. But journalism takes time. If we rush this and get it wrong, he walks away clean and becomes even more untouchable. If we take the time to do it right, we end him." "What can we do to help speed things up?" I asked. "Get me more testimonies. You know people who've been through his programs. Reach out to them. Convince them to talk. The more voices we have, the stronger the story." She pulled out a business card and handed it to Clara. "And if you can, stay engaged with his organization. Keep going to meetings. Keep recording. Sometimes the best evidence comes from giving people enough rope to hang themselves. Over the next 6 weeks, our lives became consumed by the investigation. Clara continued attending Julian's weekly meetings, recording every session, documenting every manipulative statement and tactic. I spent my evenings helping Patricia track down former followers. We created a private online survey for people to share their experiences anonymously, which gave us leads to pursue. Slowly, testimonies started to come in. There was David, a man who had spent $50,000 on Julian's programs trying to save his marriage, only to have Julian coach his wife into leaving him anyway. There was Michelle, who had been convinced to drain her retirement account to invest in one of Julian's business mentorship programs that turned out to be a glorified pyramid scheme where she recruited other followers. There was Robert, whose daughter had cut off contact with her entire family on Julian's advice, declaring them all toxic and low vibrational. Each story was heartbreaking. Each story made me angrier, and each story made the article Patricia was building more bulletproof. In early November, Clara came home from one of Julian's meetings with news. He's planning something big, she said, a New Year's retreat, not just any retreat. He's calling it the Ultimate Ascension Experience. 3 weeks long in Costa Rica. The cost is $45,000 per person. I felt my jaw drop. $45,000? And people are signing up. He says it's limited to 12 people for an intimate experience. Half the slots are already filled. She sank onto the couch, looking exhausted. Liam, we're running out of time. If Patricia doesn't publish soon, 6 more people are going to hand over $45,000 each. I called Patricia that night. We need to accelerate. People are signing up for a $45,000 retreat. We can't let that happen. I'm almost done, she assured me. 2 more interviews to conduct, some financial documents I'm waiting on from a source. Give me 2 weeks, 3 at most. Those weeks were agony. Meanwhile, Julian seemed to sense that Clara was pulling away again. He started texting her more frequently, always framed as concern for her spiritual progress. I notice you've been quiet in the group lately. Everything okay? And your energy feels blocked. Want to schedule a private session to work through it? Clara would respond minimally, saying she was busy with work, she was processing things, she was fine. But he kept pushing, kept reaching out, kept trying to reel her back in. It was textbook abuser behavior, the cycle of manipulation and love bombing designed to maintain control. Finally, in late November, Patricia called. It's done. The article is written, fact-checked, and approved by legal. It publishes tomorrow at 6 a.m. You should probably prepare yourselves. Once this goes live, things are going to get intense. That night, Clara and I barely slept. We lay in bed, holding hands, alternating between anticipation and terror. What we were doing would expose Julian, but it would also expose us. Our financial struggles, our marital problems, Clara's near-complete seduction by a con artist. It would all be public. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked her in the darkness. Once it's out there, we can't take it back. I'm sure, she said firmly. I need people to know. Other people who might be where I was, who might be vulnerable to someone like him. If our story helps even one person see through his act, it's worth it. At 6 a.m., I refreshed Patricia's news outlet website. The article appeared at 6:03. The headline read, "Spiritual coach Julian Valor built a $1 million empire on broken marriages and broken people." The article was devastating. Patricia had woven together dozens of testimonies, financial records showing Julian had made over $8 million in the past 3 years, and excerpts from Clara's recordings. She had also uncovered additional information we hadn't known. Julian had been sued twice before by former followers, both cases settled with non-disclosure agreements. She had tracked down Gerald Voss, the pyramid scheme operator Julian had worked for, who gave an on-record interview saying Julian had learned everything about manipulation and financial exploitation from him. The article included photos, Julian at his retreats, looking serene and guru-like, juxtaposed with documents showing his real name and criminal associations. It included a sidebar breaking down the full cost of staying in Julian's spiritual ecosystem for a year, which averaged out to over $60,000. And it included our story. Clara was quoted extensively, explaining how Julian had systematically isolated her from me, how he had coached her toward divorce, how he had tried to initiate a romantic relationship with her at the retreat. I was quoted too, talking about the financial strain, about selling my father's watch, about feeling helpless as I watched my wife slip away. By 8 a.m., the article was trending on social media. By 10 a.m., other news outlets were picking it up. By noon, Julian Valor was facing a media firestorm. His response was swift and predictable. He posted a statement on his website calling the article a hit piece, orchestrated by people who feel threatened by transformation and growth. He said Clara was a disgruntled follower who had misinterpreted spiritual guidance as romantic interest. He claimed all his business practices were legal and transparent, and that people were free to spend their money however they chose. But the damage was done. The comments on his social media posts, which had always been fawning and supportive, turned skeptical and then hostile. Former followers started coming forward with their own stories, emboldened by our willingness to speak publicly. His scheduled retreat for December started hemorrhaging participants, people demanding refunds, threatening legal action if they didn't get them. Within a week, the yoga studio that hosted his local meetings terminated his rental agreement. His website went dark, replaced by a holding page. His social media accounts went private. Julian Valor, the spiritual teacher who had commanded rooms full of devoted followers, had vanished, but the fallout continued. A former follower filed a class action lawsuit against him and his organization, alleging fraud and emotional manipulation. While the legal experts we consulted said the case was a long shot, it kept the story in the news. Several states opened consumer protection investigations into his business practices, and most satisfyingly to me, the retreat center in Sedona announced they were terminating their contract with him, citing reputational damage. Through it all, Clara and I held together. The public exposure of our private struggles was painful, but it was also cathartic. People reached out to us, both publicly and privately, thanking us for speaking up, sharing their own stories of manipulation and control, expressing gratitude that we had stopped them from giving money to Julian. The woman who had been planning to attend the $45,000 Costa Rica retreat sent Clara a message. I had just finished filling out the payment plan forms when I saw the article. Thank you for saving me from making the biggest financial mistake of my life. That message meant more to Clara than anything else. That was real impact. That was one person protected from the harm we had endured. In December, Clara started seeing a therapist, a real one with actual credentials, to process the emotional manipulation she had experienced. She was diagnosed with PTSD from the psychological abuse, which was validating in a strange way. It confirmed that what had happened to her wasn't weakness or stupidity. It was targeted manipulation by someone who was very, very good at it. We also started financial counseling to rebuild from the wreckage. $34,000 was gone, but we were both working. We were both committed, and we had learned an expensive lesson about vigilance and boundaries. By January, there were rumors that Julian had left the country, possibly to Mexico or Central America, somewhere he could reinvent himself again without the baggage of the investigative article following him. His organization was defunct. His programs were shut down. His followers had scattered, some finding legitimate help, others probably seeking out the next charismatic figure who promised easy enlightenment. One evening in late January, Clara and I were making dinner together in our kitchen, something we hadn't done in over a year. We were making pasta, nothing fancy, just simple food and simple togetherness. The radio was playing, we were laughing about something stupid, and I realized that this ordinary moment was more valuable than any spiritual breakthrough Julian Valor had ever promised. Thank you, Clara said suddenly, looking at me over the pot she was stirring. For what? For not giving up on me. For not giving up on us. I was so lost, Liam. I was drowning, and I didn't even know it. You threw me a lifeline even when I was trying to cut it. I set down the cutting board and crossed to her, wrapping my arms around her from behind. You came back. That's what matters. You saw through it and you came back. We took him down, she said, leaning back into my embrace. We did, together. Do you think he'll try again somewhere else? She asked. Build a new identity? Find new victims? Maybe, I admitted. Guys like him usually do. But now there's a paper trail. Now there are people who know what to look for. And maybe, just maybe, someone else will remember our story and it will help them spot the warning signs before they lose everything. She turned in my arms, looking up at me. I want to do something with this. The experience, I mean. I've been thinking about starting a support group for people who've been through similar things. People who've lost money or relationships to these kinds of predators. Would you be okay with that? I think that's a great idea, I said honestly. You could help a lot of people. We could help a lot of people, she corrected. Would you co-facilitate with me? I thought about it, about standing up in front of people and sharing the most painful, humiliating chapter of my life. about being public with my feelings of inadequacy and my mistakes, about how hard that would be. "Yes," I said, "I'll do it with you." By March, Clara had organized the first meeting of what she called the Healing from Manipulation Support Group. 8 people showed up that first night, held in a community center meeting room. Some had been victims of spiritual gurus like Julian. Others had been caught up in multi-level marketing schemes or abusive relationships or financial scams. But they all shared the common experience of being targeted, manipulated, and made to feel stupid for falling for it. I watched Clara facilitate that first meeting, sharing her story, creating space for others to share theirs, offering no judgment, just compassion and understanding. And I saw the woman I had married, the one who had gotten lost for a while, fully present and more herself than she had been in years. That group became a regular part of our lives. It grew, eventually splitting into multiple weekly meetings to accommodate everyone who wanted to attend. Clara became a trained facilitator, taking courses, reading books, learning how to help people rebuild their sense of self after manipulation. She found her purpose, not through Julian's promises of enlightenment, but through the hard work of healing and helping others heal. As for me, I learned something too. I learned that love isn't about sacrifice. It's not about working yourself to exhaustion or giving up pieces of yourself to make someone else happy. Real love is about being honest, setting boundaries, and sometimes saying no even when it's hard. If I had said no earlier, if I had questioned Julian's programs instead of just funding them, we might have avoided a lot of pain, but we also might not have learned what we needed to learn. 1 year after the article published, Patricia Chen did a follow-up story. She tracked down Julian, who was indeed operating under a new name in Belize, running wellness retreats for wealthy tourists. But when Patricia published his real identity and the link to the original article, that operation crumbled too. He moved again, and Patricia tracked him again. It became a cat-and-mouse game, but every time he tried to rebuild, journalists and former victims were there to expose him. He sent Clara a message once, from a burner phone number, claiming she had ruined his life, that he had been trying to help people, and she had destroyed everything because she couldn't handle the truth he was showing her. Clara read it to me. We documented it for potential future legal action, and then she blocked the number. She didn't engage. She didn't defend herself. She had nothing to prove to him. "Do you know what I realized?" she told me after that message. "He still thinks he did nothing wrong. In his mind, he's the victim. He's the misunderstood genius, and we're all just too unenlightened to appreciate him." "Does that bother you?" I asked. "Not anymore. I can't control what he believes. I can only control what I do with my own life. And I'm choosing to build something real." She was right. We were building something real. Not just our marriage, though that was stronger than it had ever been, but something bigger. A community of people who had survived manipulation and were helping others survive it too. A network of awareness that might prevent the next Julian Valor from gaining a foothold. Today, 2 years after that first message on Clara's phone, our apartment looks different. The self-help books are gone, replaced by novels and biographies. The meditation corner has been converted into a reading nook. We have a jar on the kitchen counter again, collecting spare change, saving for that house we always wanted. We're not there yet, but we will be. We're rebuilding. I got my father's watch back, in a way. I couldn't afford to buy back the original, but Clara surprised me on our 10th anniversary with a vintage Omega from the same year, restored and beautiful. It wasn't the same watch, but the love behind the gesture was real. More real than anything Julian Valor ever sold. And Clara is happy. Genuinely happy. Not the manufactured bliss of a retreat or a meditation high, but the deep contentment that comes from knowing who you are and choosing consciously how to spend your days. She still practices yoga and meditation, but now they're tools she uses, not an identity she performs. She's herself, fully and completely herself, and I get to be married to her. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the experience, if I wish we had never encountered Julian Valor. It's a complicated question. I regret the pain, the money, the time lost, but I don't regret what we learned. I don't regret that it showed us how strong our marriage could be when we were truly fighting for it together. I don't regret that it led Clara to the work she does now, helping people heal. What I learned is this: real growth doesn't come from a guru or a retreat or a program you have to pay thousands of dollars to access. Real growth comes from facing hard truths about yourself, making difficult changes, and doing the daily, unglamorous work of becoming a better person. It comes from loving people even when it's hard, from setting boundaries even when it's uncomfortable, from asking for help when you need it. And it comes from understanding that anyone who tells you they have all the answers, anyone who promises you enlightenment for a price, anyone who asks you to cut off the people who love you in order to follow them, is lying. They don't have your best interests at heart. They have their own interests at heart, and you're just a means to that end. So if you're reading this, if you or someone you love is caught up with a spiritual teacher or a guru or a coach who